Enoch Powell's River of Blood speech, which was delivered to the Conservative Association meeting in Birmingham on April the 20th, 1968. And it is as follows. The supreme function of statesmanship is to provide against preventable evils. In seeking to do so, it encounters obstacles which are deeply rooted in human nature. One is that by the very order of things, such evils are not demonstrable until they have occurred. At each stage in their onset, there is room for doubt and for dispute, whether they be real or imaginary. By the same token, they attract little attention in comparison with current troubles, which are both indisputable and pressing, whence to be set in temptation of all politics to concern itself with the immediate present at the expense of the future. Above all, people are disposed to make predicting troubles for causing troubles, and even for desiring troubles. If only, they love to think, if only people wouldn't talk about it, it probably wouldn't happen. Perhaps this habit goes back to the primitive belief that the word and the thing, the name and the object, are identical. At all events, the discussion of future grave, but with effort now, avoidable evils is the most unpopular and at the same time most necessary occupation for the politician. Those who knowingly shirk it deserve, and not infrequently receive, the curses of those who come after. A week or two ago, I fell into conversation with a constituent, a middle-aged, quite ordinary working man, employed in one of our nationalised industries. After a sentence or two about the weather, he suddenly said, "If I had the money to go, I wouldn't stay in this country." I made some reply to the effect that even this government wouldn't last forever, but he took no notice and continued, "I have 3 children, all of them, been through grammar school, and 2 of them married now, with family. I shan't be satisfied till I've seen them all settled overseas. In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the immigrant will have the whip and over the white man." I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such an horrible thing? How dare I stir up trouble and inflame feelings by repeating such conversations? The answer is that I do not have the right not to do so. Here is a decent, ordinary fellow Englishman who in broad daylight in my own town says to me, his Member of Parliament, that his country will not be worth living in for his children. At once to negligible proportions, and that the necessary legislative and administrative measures to be taken without delay, I stressed the words for settlement. This has nothing to do with the entry of Commonwealth citizens, any more than of aliens into this country for the purpose of study or of improving their qualifications, like for instance the Commonwealth doctors, who, to the advantage of their own countries, have enabled our hospitals' service to be expanded faster than would otherwise have been possible. They are not and have never been immigrants. I turn to re-emigration. If all immigration ended tomorrow, the rate of growth of the immigrant and immigrant-descended population would be substantially reduced. But the prospective size of this element in the population would still leave the basic character of the national danger unaffected. This can only be tackled while a considerable proportion of the total still comprises of persons who entered this country during the last 10 years or so. Hence the urgency of implementing now the second element of the Conservative Party's policy, the encouragement of re-emigration. Nobody can take an estimate of the numbers which, with generous assistance, would choose either to return to their countries of origin or go to other countries anxious to receive the manpower and the skills they represent. Nobody knows because no such policy has yet been attempted. I can only say that, even at present, immigrants in my own constituency from time to time come to me asking if I can find them assistance to return home. If such a policy were adopted and pursued with a determination which the gravity of the alternative justifies, the resultant overflow could appreciably alter my prospects. The third element of the Conservative Party's policy is that all who are in this country as citizens should be equal before the law, and there shall be no discrimination or difference made between them by public authority. As Mr. Heath has put it, we will have no first-class citizens and second-class citizens. This does not mean that the immigrant and his descendant should be elevated into a privileged or special class, or that the citizen should be denied his right to discriminate in the management of his own affairs between one fellow citizen and another, or that he should be subjected to imposition as to reasons and motive for behaving in one lawful manner rather than another. There could be no grosser misconception of the realities which is entertained by those who vociferously demand legislation, as they call it, against discrimination, whether they be leader writers of the same kidney and sometimes on the same newspaper, which year after year in the 1930s tried to blind this country to the rising peril which confronted it, or archbishops who lived in palaces, faring delicately with the bedclothes pulled right over their heads. They have got it exactly and diametrically wrong. The discrimination and the deprivation, the sense of alarm and resentment lies not with the immigrant population, but with those among whom they have come and are still coming. Eight years ago, in a respectable street in Wolverhampton, a house was sold to an immigrant. Now only one white, a woman, old age pensioner lives there. This is her story. She lost her husband and both her sons in the war, so she turned a 7-roomed house, her only asset, into a boarding house. She worked hard and did well, paid off her mortgage and began to put something by for her old age. Then the immigrants moved in. With growing fear, she saw one house after another taken over. The quiet street became a place of noise and confusion. Regretfully, her white tenants moved out. The day after the last one left, she was awakened by 7 a.m. by 2 immigrants who wanted to use her phone to contact their employer. When she refused, as she would have refused any stranger at such an hour, she was abused and feared she would have been attacked but for the chain on her door. Immigrant families have tried to rent rooms in her house, but she always refused. Her little store of money went, and after paying rates, she has left less than £2 per week. She went to apply for a rate reduction and was seen by a young girl who, on hearing she had a 7-roomed house, suggested she should let part of it. When she said the only people she could get were immigrants, the girl said, "Racial prejudice won't get you anywhere in this country." So she went home. The telephone is her lifeline. Her family paid a bill and help her out as best they can. Immigrants have offered to buy her house at a price which the prospective landlord would be able to recover from his tenants in a week, or at most a few months. She's becoming afraid to go out. Windows are broken. She finds excretia pushed through a letterbox. When she goes to the shops, she is followed by children, charming, white grinning Pekingese. They cannot speak English, but one word they know: racialist, they chant. When the new race relations bill is passed, this woman is convinced she will go to prison. And is she so wrong? I begin to wonder. The other dangerous delusion from which those who are willfully or otherwise blind to realities suffer is summed up in the word integration. To be integrated into a population means to become, for all practical purposes, indistinguishable from its other members. Now, at all times where there are marked physical differences, especially of colour, integration is difficult, though over a period it's definitely not impossible. There are among the Commonwealth immigrants who have come to live here in the last 15 years or so, many thousands who wish and purpose is to be integrated, and whose every thought and endeavour is bent in that direction. But to imagine that such a thing enters the heads of a great and growing majority of immigrants and their descendants is a ludicrous misconception and a dangerous one. We are on the verge of a change. Hitherto it has been force of circumstance and a background which has rendered the very idea of integration inaccessible to the great part of the immigrant population, that they never conceived or intended such a thing, and that their numbers and physical concentration meant the pressures towards integration, which normally bear upon any small minority, simply did not operate. Now we are seeing the growth of positive forces acting against integration, of vested interest in the preservation and sharpening of racial and religious differences, with a view to the exercise of actual domination. First over fellow immigrants and then over the rest of the population. The cloud no bigger than a man's hand that can so rapidly overcast the sky has been visible recently in Wolverhampton and has shown signs of spreading quickly. All credit to John Stonehouse for having had the insight to perceive that the courage to say it. For these dangerous and divisive elements, the legislation proposed in the Race Relations Bill is the very pabulum they need to flourish. Here is the means of showing that the immigrant communities can organise to consolidate their members, to agitate and campaign against their fellow citizens, and to overawe and dominate the rest with the legal weapons which the ignorant and the ill-informed have provided. As I look ahead, I'm filled with foreboding. Like the Roman, I see the river Tiber foaming with much blood. That tragic and interactable phenomenon which we watch with horror on the other side of the Atlantic, but which there is interwoven with the history and existence of the States itself, is coming upon us here by our own volition and our own neglect. Indeed, it has all but come in numerical terms. It will be of American proportions long before the end of the century. Only resolute and urgent action will avert it, even now. Whether there will be the public will to demand and obtain that action, I do not know. All I know is that to see and not to speak would be a great betrayal. The end of the speech. And I want to remind you that was April the 20th, 1968. Thank you for listening.